In 1798, while the author of this work was residing in London, exiled from France by the horrors of the Revolution, and gaining a subsistence by the productions of his pen, which were tinctured with the skepticism and infidelity of the times, he was informed of the death of his venerable mother, whose last days had been embittered by the recollection of his errors, and who had left him in her dying moments a solemn admonition to retrace his steps. The thought of having saddened the old age of that tender and religious parent who had borne him in her womb overwhelmed him with confusion. The tears gushed from his eyes, and the Christian sentiments in which he had been educated returned. Under the impulses of a generous and affectionate heart, I wept and I believed. But the trouble which harassed his mind did not entirely vanish until he had formed a plan of redeeming his first publications by the consecration of his splendid abilities to the honor of religion. Such was the origin of the genius of Christianity, in the composition of which he labored with all the ardor all the ardor of a son who was erecting a mausoleum to his mother. When this work made its appearance in 1802, infidelity was the order of the day in France. That beautiful country whose people had once held so prominent a rank among the Catholic nations of Europe presented but a vast scene of ruins. The fatal consequences of that systematic war which impious sophists had waged against religion during the latter half of the 18th century. The revolution had swept away in its desolating course all the landmarks of the ancient society. Churches and altars had been overthrown. The priests of God had been massacred or driven into exile. Asylums of virtue and learning had been profaned and laid waste. Everything august and sacred had disappeared. In the political and social sphere, the same terrific destruction was witnessed. After a succession of convulsions which had overthrown the Bourbon dynasty, and during which the passions of men had rioted amid the wildest anarchy and the most savage acts of bloodshed, the chief authority became vested in a consul whose mission was to re-establish social order, and whose efforts in that direction were gladly welcomed by the nation, grown, weary, and sick, as it were, of the dreadful calamities that had come upon them. It was an auspicious moment for the fearless champion of Christianity to herald the claims of that religion whose doctrines constituted the only safe guide of the governing and the governed. But among a people who to a great extent had conceived a profound antipathy to the theory and practice of religion, by the artful and persevering efforts of an infidel philosophy to render the Christian name an object of derision and contempt, a new method of argument was necessary to obtain even a hearing in the case, much more to bring back the popular mind to a due veneration for the church and her teachings. It would have been useless when the great principles of religious belief were disregarded, when the authority of ages was set at naught, to undertake the vindication of Christianity by the exhibition of those external evidences which demonstrate its divine origin. Men had become deluded with the idea that the Christian religion or the church, for these terms are synonymous, had been a serious obstacle in the way of human progress, that having been invented in a barbarous age, its dogmas were absurd and its ceremonies ridiculous, that it intended to enslave the mind, oppose the arts and sciences, and was in general hostile to the liberty of man and the advancement of civilization. It was necessary, therefore, in order to refute these errors, to exhibit the intrinsic excellence and beauty of the Christian religion, to show its analogy with the dictates of natural reason, its admirable correspondence with the instincts of the human heart, its ennobling influence upon literature and the arts, its beneficent effects upon society, its wonderful achievements for the civilization and happiness of nature, its infinite superiority over all other systems, its in elevating the character, improving the condition, and answering the wants of man under all the circumstances of life. In a word, to show according to the design of our author, not that the Christian religion is excellent because it comes from God, but it comes from God because it is excellent. For this purpose, he passes in review the principal mysteries and tenets of Christianity, draws a comparison between Christian and pagan literature, displays the advantages which painting, sculpture, and other arts have derived from religious inspiration, its accordance with the scenes of nature and the sentiments of the heart, describes the wonders of monastic order, describes the wonders of missionary enterprise, the extensive services of the monastic orders, and concludes with a general survey of the immense blessings conferred upon mankind by the Christian church. In displaying this magnificent picture to the contemplation of the reader, the author employs all the resources of ancient and modern learning, the information derived from the extensive travel and the profound study of human nature, and those ornaments of style which the loftiest poetry and the most glowing fancy can place at his command. In turn, the philosopher, the historian, the traveler, and the poet, he adopts every means of promoting the great end in view to to enamor the heart of man with the charms of religion, and to prove that she is eminently the source of all that is lovely and of good report, of all that is beautiful and sublime. Among all the works of Chateaubriand, none, perhaps, is so remarkable as this for that combination of impressive eloquence, descriptive power, and a pathetic sentiment which imparts such a fascination to his style, and which caused Napoleon the First to observe that it was not the style of Racine, but of a prophet that nature had given him. The sacred flame, and it breathed in all his works. And the publication of such a work at such a time could not but enlist against it a powerful opposition among the advocates of infidelity, but its superior excellence and brilliant character obtained an easy triumph over the critics who had attempted to crush its influence. In 2 years it had passed through 7 editions, and such was the popularity it acquired that it was translated into the Italian, German, and Russian languages in France. The friends of religion hailed it as the olive branch of peace and hope, a messenger of heaven sent forth to solace the general affliction, to heal the wounds of so many desolate hearts, after the frightful deluge of impiety which had laid waste that unfortunate country. On the other hand, the wavering in faith and even they who had been perverted by the sophistry of the times were drawn to a profitable investigation of religion by the new and irresistible charms that had been thrown around it. It cannot be denied that the genius of Christianity exerted a most powerful and beneficial influence in Europe for the good of religion and the improvement of literature.